This is amazing. This is huge. Normally I go places, nobody is from that local county. This is amazing. This is good. How many of y'all from Alabama? Okay. Or how many of us are from the South? Y'all gonna have a real good understanding of me today. Oh, they may not want to raise their hand. So I went over to Africa. I was asked to go over to Africa to speak to their parliament and to their Supreme Court justice and their ambassadors and the heads of their NGOs, non-government organizations for Rwanda, for 4 days. And so I asked a very important question. Do they understand English? Oh, yes, they understand English. Great. Because the translation from English to Kinyarwanda is a 1 to 4, 1 to 5. So if you say, if you speak one sentence, it takes them 5 sentences to say what you just said. And so they said they understood English. So I get up there and I'm in this auditorium and I start speaking. I did not get one sentence out. And this ambassador stands up from over here, comes up, walks up on stage, and whispers in my ear, "Turn off the Southern. Turn off the Southern." And I'm thinking, I don't know how to talk not having Southern. So it's nice to have y'all here. I tried real well for that one, but it didn't work. And I ended up translating the rest of the 4 days. But can we start with prayer? Our dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for your love and your care. And Lord, we ask that you will help us to understand what you'd have us to do. Lord, there's not much time. Help us to understand how to take care of our bodies. Help us to understand our responsibilities and sharing your love with other folks. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Preparation. Who believes in preparing? I think preparation is very important. I teach fire prevention in the schools. We see less structure fires today than when I started 43 years ago. In the United States Fire Administration says that's because of electrical codes. That's number one. Number two is because of us going into the school systems and teaching fire prevention. It's huge. I teach the kids stop, drop, and roll. I have my guys come in and they don't, that they feel comfortable, that they're not Darth Vader coming in or whatever, they're packed. And then we go out and we have fun. We go out and squirt water and have fun with the kids so they get to know my firefighters. And I think that's important. Prevention is so important. I was traveling from Texas, going on the way back to coming back through this way on I-10. And just as I came into Mississippi out of Louisiana, across that big bridge there, just on this side, actually I saw this wreck happen right in front of me. When the firefighters get off the truck, is it time now to take out their manuals and say, how do you use jaws of life? They better know. They better know how to rip that car open to get this guy out. This here, can anybody tell what's in the water there? It's a vehicle. It was a couple and their 2 children from Asheville, North Carolina. The daughter, 16-year-old daughter, just got her driver's license. And they go for a day drive coming over into Tennessee. That's the most rafted river in the whole United States. It's called the Pigeon River. And Daddy, can I drive? Can I drive? No, you can't drive on the interstate. It's too dangerous. Well, they get off, come into Tennessee on I-40, exit 451. They get off and they turn down a Waterville Road. And Daddy, can I drive? We're off the interstate. Well, yes, this should be safe. And he gets out. Mama goes to the back seat. Daughter goes to the driver's seat. Daddy goes over to where Mama's sitting. They take off down Waterville Road, which is a little narrow road. And the daughter starts driving, and the right tire goes off the road a little bit, which is easy on that road. And what does? She stomps it, turns it left to get out of the hole, shoots back across, shoots over into the river. Is that the time to learn how to do swiftwater rescue? They better know what they're doing ahead of time. The family was saved, and that's a good thing. You get a structure fire. The officer just did a run around the house, just did a 360 to see if anybody's upstairs, to see if there's any propane tanks back there. Is there any exposures back there? Is there any holes back there? Is anybody looking out a window hollering, get me out, get me out? He comes around, he does this 360. The crew's ready to go in. Is this the time to say, oh, how do you use a fire hose? Prepare. Prepare, prepare, prepare. In the fire service, we say, practice until you can't get it wrong. Not practice till you get it right. Practice till you can't get it wrong. Because people's lives are depending on what we do. Preparing. How to prepare the brain for battle. Can anybody tell me what the most important organ in the body is? It's the brain. Some people say the heart. I say it's the brain. Why the brain? The brain runs everything in the body. Any other reason? That's exactly the answer. It is how we communicate with God. If the brain is clogged up with alcohol, with drugs, let's go back to Texas, Dallas, Texas, Dallas First Church, Jim Gillies' church. We talked about it a few minutes ago. There's a guy, we did a health expo at the very beginning to get people to come to our evangelistic meetings, get some interest. Then we would tell them we're going to have some more health meetings each night for a whole month if you'd like to come. Well, this big old guy comes through. He comes in, sits down with me, and I was at booth 8. See how he liked the program, talked about God. And I said, how would you like to come back to some more meetings like what you've learned today? He said, I'd like that. Now, he didn't tell me he just got out of prison because he was a drug dealer. He didn't tell me he was still working the streets of Dallas as a drug dealer, back on the streets. He didn't tell me that he and his wife were about to get a divorce, separate and get a divorce because they couldn't get along. So he starts coming to the meetings. We've been in the meetings about 10 days. And I asked him, I said, how is it? He said, it's clear as mud. Well, what he'd do is he'd come and he'd sit that seat. Now, Dallas, the first church there in Dallas is a big church. And he would sit in that seat right there. That seat right there. And it would be so full. We'd do the health nugget for 15 minutes before we do the evangelistic series each night. And he was just too embarrassed to get up and walk out. So we sat there every night through the whole thing just so we could get that health information. But yet he said that he got the health part, but he didn't get the gospel part. He said it was clear as mud. And I said, listen, I'd learned a little bit about the guy, this back information I just shared. Now, normally you don't ask a drug dealer if he wants to come to a drug cessation class. But does God ever nudge you to say something through the Holy Spirit? Out of nowhere, I'm saying, hey, listen, we got some drug addiction cessation classes going on. Would you like to come? You know, sometimes you think, you go, where did that come from, you know? And he said yes. And so he came. We got him a job during the day, so he was back in bed with his wife at night where he belonged. Things got better there. He wasn't out on the streets with the boys in Dallas at night. He quit in the addiction cessation class. He quit doing drugs, alcohol. And we helped him with looking for a job. You can see how health kind of makes those things happen, his interest in health. You think if we'd just gone out on the streets at night at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, buddy, you want to take a drug cessation class? Let me tell you about Jesus. You know, he wouldn't have been interested in either of those possibly. A week before the meetings were over, I asked him, I said, how is it? He says, it's clear. fast. He gave up quick. He gave up drinking. He gave up the drugs. It was miraculous. And he gave up all of that. And like I said, we helped him with the job. And a week before we quit, I said, "How is it?" And he says, "It's clear. I'm understanding now." The last week, Jim baptized him into his church. What happened with his brain? Did it clear it up? Does alcohol affect our discernment? Does drugs affect our discernment? I'd like to share what other things can affect discernment. Now, do y'all believe there's a battle going on between good and bad? You know, we think we have it tough sometimes, but sometimes you just have to go look around. I would have patients sometimes say, "Oh, it's terrible, poor me," and all I had to do is put them in a wheelchair and roll them down the hall and show them somebody else. You know, an 18-year-old boy that couldn't move his neck. All he could do is blink his eyes. He'd been the prom king. He was the football quarterback. The high school. On the way home, he wrecked less than a block from the house. He was drunk, and he was a quadriplegic. Couldn't move nothing except he could look to the right, look to the left, blink his eyes. That was it. He had no more motor skills that he could move, that he controlled. Maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was. I went to Rwanda several times. The conference president, his wife, and 8 children had been macheted to death. I don't know how I deal with that. I met people there in Rwanda who had no living relative. None. See, when the Hutus finally decided to take out the Tutsis, it came across the media. It said, "Kill the cockroaches." Because that's what the Hutus called the Tutsis. And it was open slaughter. They would get them to come to the churches. The Hutus would get the Protestant churches. And you learn this from meeting people, and you learn this from going to the Genocide Museum. Over 1 million people were killed in 100 days. And the Hutus would go to the not just the Christian, I say the Christian preachers, which include Catholicism and Protestantism. And they say, "Listen, we'll spare you your life and your family's life. Just get everybody in your church and lock the door." They would either burn the church, crush the church on top of them, or go inside with machetes and slaughter everybody. And I won't even go into it because there's children here, how really insane it was. And Daniel says in Daniel 12:1, at the end when Michael stands up, it will be a time as never before. It's going to be worse than that. I don't know. How do you prepare the brain for battle? I mean, preparing the brain for battle right now is tough enough. But what about what's to come? But there's some things that we can do physiologically that can prepare the brain for battle. And let's take a look. First, we have to look at the fuel that we put in the brain. Can anybody guess how much money this car is worth? $50,000. It's a Rolls Gold Edition. $8.5 million. Do you think that they are particular in what fuel goes in that vehicle? Not that they can't afford it, they just want that vehicle to run right. How about this car? $18.9 million. Or what about this little old car? This thing doesn't cost that much. It's pretty inexpensive. But this guy, he sent it wasn't fast enough for him. He sent it to Mr. Petty in Randall, or actually in Level Cross, North Carolina. And between what he did to the engine and the NOS in the trunk, it does 1,500 horsepower. He went and took out first gear. He put 2 fuel pumps. The man didn't even run it. He ran it 300 miles before he had the engine rebuilt. It has 2 fuel pumps, 2 fuel lines. Each fuel line is 3/4 of an inch in diameter. Mr. Petty says you no longer get miles per gallon because with the other motor, he only got 2-point-something miles to the gallon. But now with this motor that he rebuilt, he says you get miles per tank. And he says you can no longer buy fuel at a gas station. You have to put racing fuel, 115 octane in it. And so as you look at the fuel that we put in our bodies, is it important? Well, let's look at this car. It's the S-Class Cabriolet. And what does Mercedes say about fuel? I drove by the Mercedes place yesterday, just south of Birmingham. And in the manual it says, note, damage caused by wrong fuel. Even small amounts of the wrong fuel could result in damage to the fuel system, the engine, and the emission control system. Never refuel using diesel, gasoline, more than 10% ethanol, more than 3% methanol, additives containing metal. If you accidentally refuel with the wrong fuel, do not switch the engine on. Why? It says even small amounts of the wrong fuel could result in damage to the fuel system and the engine. And then it says the repair costs are high. So, let's see here. I was looking for a young. Can you help me a minute? Come on now. Okay, so here's how the fuel system works. We put fuel into the mouth, and then as we chew it up, and we mix the saliva with it, it then it just fills it full of enzymes, amylase, protease, and lipase. As he swallows it, goes through his esophagus into his stomach. And there in the first part of the stomach, you have two digestions in the stomach, the first one and the second one. And that first part, it sits there and it just starts breaking it down. And then it then goes to the second part, the hydrochloric acid and the other component, the other enzymes start breaking it down. And if you're not stressed, you have good breaking down from macro to micronutrients. And then it goes into his small intestines. And then you have more enzymes that comes in. The pH changes from a low pH to a higher pH. And we have further breaking down. And then you got little villi, it looks like fingers. And you got a little vessel here, which is a lymphatic vessel. You got vessels around, vascular vessels around the side. And then if you break it down small enough, it then goes into those little tiny micro holes, screens in the villi, and it goes into the blood. And that's what we do when we have digestion in the body. And then as it goes into the blood, it goes everywhere in the body, including the brain. So let's take an example. You put a Twinkie in your mouth. You know what a Twinkie is?
A Twinkie is like an orange little pastry.
Okay. In Africa, they don't know what it is. And I say, that's okay. You don't want to know what that is. So we put the Twinkie in the mouth. Then what happens? He chews it up. It breaks it down. It goes into the stomach. It goes into the small intestines. It goes into the blood. And it goes to the brain. And now he has a Twinkie brain. True? If he eats chicken, it goes in the mouth. He chews up the chicken. It goes down the esophagus, into the stomach, into the small intestines, into the villi, into the blood, into the brain. Now he has a chicken brain. That's how it works. Whatever we eat will affect the brain. Do you want a Twinkie brain, or do you want an apple or an orange or a granola like we had for breakfast this morning? That is going to have far more nutrition than the Twinkie to give to the brain. Do you see how it works? You can sit down. So as we look, even small amounts of the wrong fuel could result in damage to our fuel system and to the engine, and are the repair costs high to the body from a processed diet? It is true. The brain is the organ and instrument of the mind and controls the whole body. In order for the other parts of the system to be healthy, the brain must be healthy. And in order for the brain to be healthy, the blood must be pure. If by correct habits of eating and drinking, the blood is kept pure, the brain will be properly nourished. So what are we learning in physiology here? If you have a health issue, before you fix the body, you must fix what? The brain. And how do you fix the brain? You take care of the blood. And how do you take care of the blood? What you eat or what you drink. You see the physiology that God gives us here? It's very clear. Do we see that here in 1 Corinthians 10? God could have just said, therefore, whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. Would that have been conclusive? It would have. But why did God say, whether therefore you eat or drink? Why did He say that? Because He loves us. He loves us, and He wants to help us to take care of our bodies. And so He's given us tips. It's kind of like out in the hallway, you've got those 10 commandments. And the fourth one, it says, there's a little tidbit on that one. It says, remember, because it's going to be forgotten. He could have just taken that word out and just like the others, but did they forget not to, that we hadn't forgot it's not a problem to kill, or at least for the most part. But that fourth one, He said, there's going to be a problem. Some folks are going to forget that one. And so I'm going to put remember on there because people will forget this because He loves us. And here He said, you've got to be careful of what you eat or drink because it affects your blood. And what is in the blood affects your brain. Let me give you the bottom line to health. I will share with you the bottom line to health. And you can read it here in this writing here. But I had a surgeon teach me this years ago. And I'll use this as an example. He said, you have to keep the blood clean. You cannot allow bad stuff to get into the blood. Like the guy in Dallas. What kind of bad stuff was he put into the blood? Drugs, alcohol, nicotine. What about sleep deprivation? Can that affect the blood? Absolutely. He says, so you have to take away anything bad that could be tainting the blood. Has anybody ever been a hunter? Okay. So when you hunted, I've never been a hunter. I fished. I guess I was a hunter when I was a kid. But can the meat get tainted? And then is it any good? No. And so the blood can get tainted, like the deer meat can get tainted. And so the surgeon said, Walt, you cannot allow bad stuff to get into the blood. Does stress cause stuff in the blood to be harmful to get into the blood? Yeah, it does. Yes, it does. So then he says the second thing you have to do is put what needs to be in the blood. You got fats, proteins, carbohydrates. You got vitamins, which are a catalyst that makes the fats, proteins, and carbohydrates work. Then you've got minerals, which is a catalyst that kicks on the vitamins to be 8 cylinders, to be a catalyst to kick on the fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Then you've got to have water. You got to have hormones. You got to have oxygen. All this stuff has to be in the blood. Why? It's not just the blood needs to have it. It's because the blood is what provides the nutrients for the cells, whether it's a brain cell or a liver cell. But the next thing this surgeon taught me is, one, you've got to protect the blood, provide what the blood needs, but then you have to have what's called perfusion, blood flow. If you have poor perfusion, I had a lady come in yesterday with a wound on her leg. It wasn't bad. It was an easy wound. We'll talk about how to deal with wounds tomorrow. But the first thing I asked this lady, do you use tobacco? Because see, tobacco is a vasoconstrictor, and it does not allow adequate capillary blood flow. And you don't heal as well when a person uses tobacco. She doesn't. So that was a good thing. And so you've got to have good blood flow. And how do we get good blood flow? One of the best ways is just move, exercise. Yeah. So basic two things. Don't let stuff bad get into the blood cell, which would be like a Twinkie. But put into the blood, like what we had for breakfast. We had almonds, walnuts, and pecans, all kinds of nuts. We had granola. We had I'm trying to think what else. Fruit. Yeah, we had fruit, waffles, good stuff. That's going to give good nutrition in there. And then we got to have adequate perfusion. And we'll talk about that here. Think of it. And I'm reading from Harvard. Most of what I'm going to share about today is from Harvard, Mayo Clinic, and what they have to say about taking care of the brain. And see if you've heard this before. Think about it. Your brain is always on. It takes care of your thoughts and movements, your breathing, and heartbeat. Your senses, it works 24/7, even while you're asleep. This means your brain requires a constant supply of fuel. That fuel comes from the foods you eat. What's in that food makes all the difference. Put simply, what you eat directly affects the structure, function of your brain, and ultimately your mood. You know, I have people who come in that weigh 450, 500, 550 pounds, and I can pretty well tell you what they eat. It's pretty consistent. What are they eating? Chips, hot dogs, hamburgers, pizza, soft drinks, candy. That's pretty well what they're eating. Now, but they're big. But does that mean that they're malnourished? They are. But they're eating what's called empty calories. They're not eating nutrition-dense food. And so often in an affluent society, when I go to Rwanda, when I go out to the country, I'm just amazed what people can do. It's amazing the strength that these people have and their health. But when I go into Kigali, which is 3 million people who've taken on the standard American diet, they're now having heart disease and diabetes and the problems that we have because they started eating our food, the McDonald's and the donuts. Like an expensive car, Harvard University says, your brain functions best when it gets only premium fuel. Just like that car that Mr. Petty said now has to have 115% octane because this vehicle now is a race car. Eating high-quality foods that contain lots of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants nourishes the brain and protects it from oxidative stress, the waste, free radicals produced when the body uses oxygen, which can damage cells. Unfortunately, just like an expensive car, your brain can be damaged if you ingest anything other than premium fuel. If substances from low premium fuels, such as what you get from processed or refined foods, gets into the brain, listen to this, y'all. It has little ability to get rid of them. So when we eat that Twinkie, when we eat that hot dog, when we eat that donut, the brain, according to Harvard, has a hard time getting rid of the waste from those processed foods. Diets high in refined sugars, for example, are harmful to the brain. In addition to worsening your body's regulation of insulin, they also promote inflammation and oxidative stress. Multiple studies have found a correlation between a diet and refined sugars and impaired brain function, and even a worsening of symptoms of mood disorders such as depression. What's the other problem we have in the South? We fry everything. Maters, taters, chickens, pigs, okra, ice cream. When I tell Africans we fry ice cream, they think, what? How? But we do. We figured out how to fry ice cream. We fry Twinkies. We fry Oreos, pickles. If we can fry it, we fry it. If we don't fry it, we pour oil in it. My grandma, when she make a pot of green beans, she put more than 1 cup of vegetable oil in it. More than one. It looked like an oil slick across the top. And it tasted good to my East Tennessee tongue. It would not today because Mary Lou's changed it. But what I grew up in with an East Tennessee tongue, I like grandma's green beans. But were they healthy? Not at all. And as we look at all those oils, is it okay to eat oil sometime? Yes, but not in the amounts that we eat in our. And we say that, well, we're just genetic. We'll give you an example. I was down in Hancock County. Y'all know where Hancock County is, over on the other side, Mississippi. Well, Katrina come through. My youngest son, Carson, and I, we go down there several times to help the fire department down there because I-10 ran through there. Accidents on I-10, they didn't have firefighters. And so we went and ran wrecks and medical calls at one of the ports and wildland fires and house fires and several weeks at a time. And I was talking to a assistant chief one time, and I said, we're sitting there, and I said, Chief, I said, you got any health problems? I mean, you can just look at him. You know he's got health problems. Just look at him. You know, my daddy taught me to look at cows. You know how they look, how they walk. You know, you do the same thing with people. Just look at their eyes, look at how they walk. You can tell they're sick or not. And this poor fella, he was obese, and he could hardly move. And I said, Chief, I said, you got any health problems? Yeah. What's the problems? Well, I got diabetes. You got blood pressure? Yeah, I got blood pressure. You got high cholesterol? Yeah, I got high cholesterol. Triglycerides? Yeah, I got high triglycerides. And we knew he had obesity issues, syndrome X. And I said, this is what I do. Yes, I help with firefighting. That's just something I like giving back to the community. But I said, I can help you if you're interested. You can? What do I got to do? So I started telling him what to do. And he goes, no, he didn't want to hear no more. No more. He said, my doctor said I have Southern Mississippi syndrome. And all I got to do is go to him and he'll give me some pills and I can do whatever I want to and go back and see him. Is that not how we are? Yeah, that's true. It makes sense. Even if your brain is deprived of good quality nutrition, or if free radicals or damaging inflammatory cells are circulating with the brain's enclosed space, further contributing to the brain tissue injury, consequences are to be, what does Harvard say? Expected. When we eat processed foods, Harvard said it is expected to have problems. If someone came up to you and just hit you as hard as they could in your stomach, it would be expected your stomach's going to hurt and probably have damage. That would just be expected. When I go up on a wreck and I see a car plumb tore up like that car there, it's expected someone's going to be hurt inside. Harvard says when you eat processed foods, which Harvard said is the #1 cause of inflammation in America, it's expected. What? Let's go back. If your brain is deprived from good quality nutrition, one is deprived of it, or free radicals or damaging inflammatory cells are circulating with the brain's enclosed space, further contributing to the brain tissue injury, that's from eating those processed foods, consequences are to be expected. That's just how it is. What's interesting is that for many years, the medical field did not fully acknowledge the connection between mood and food. And this is Harvard University. Do you see where the rocks are crying out, y'all? Today, fortunately, the field of nutrition psychiatry is finding there are many consequences and correlations between not only what you eat, how you feel, and how you ultimately behave, but also the kinds of bacteria that live in your gut. And we could speak a whole weekend on gut biome. That is huge. MIT is doing some major research on gut biome. What is going on in your gut? We're told now probably 75% of our immune system is based on our gut biome. So when you have, who's ever ridden a steam train? Anybody ridden a steam train? It takes two things to run that steam train. It takes water and it takes coal. And not even the same, not all coals are the same. There are some coals that have higher BTUs. And so they use special coals in these steam trains. What if you put toilet paper in there? Do you think it's going to go up the mountain very well? No, because you don't have good BTUs there. These are the fuels for the brain. This is the foods for the brain that are the most nutritious. Research after research that I read says avocados are the number. Anybody from the Caribbean? Oh, you don't like avocados then, do you? You don't mess with Caribbean people and African people and take their avocados and the mangoes away. They got to have their avocado. Avocado is the number one food for the brain. Beets, blueberries. Do some research on Alzheimer's disease and look what blueberries and how the effect is on Alzheimer's. Broccoli, celery, green leafy vegetables, rosemary, turmeric, potatoes, asparagus. Walnuts is the number one nut for the brain. Black walnuts is the number one nut for the heart. English walnuts is second, but for the brain, English walnuts is the best for the brain. WHO and CDC identifies a second leading item, and that's psychology. Who's ever read Psychology Today? It's a great publication that you can learn. I like learning from these things. Not that I agree with everything they say, but I do learn from them. Now get this, y'all. Look at this. This is amazing. Neuroscientists around the globe agree that physical activity, exercise, is the best medication to maintain brain health throughout one's lifespan. But those 8 laws of health, you know, that's just old stuff. How far back does those 8 laws of health go? What was the date? That we got it, and when we were told about it, June 6, 1863. That's 160 years ago. Crazy, huh? Neuroscientists around the globe agree that physical activity, exercise, is the best medication to maintain brain health throughout one's lifespan. Just read research from neurologists, also from psychologists on the effects of exercise on brain function. It's huge. Exercise improves the structure, function, and connectivity of your brain. There are many reasons that exercise is good for your brain. These include increases blood flow, which improves cerebrovascular health, the release of neurotropic factors like BDNF, which stimulates the growth of new neurons, and the benefits of glucose and lipid metabolism, which bring nourishment to the brain. And what is that? Exercise brings nourishment to the brain. Again, the nourishment is in the blood cell. And how do we get that blood cell to the brain? We got to have that perfusion, we got to have that circulation, and exercise is what increases that blood flow to the organs, to the brain. People who regularly perform aerobic exercise like running, jogging, brisk walking, swimming, cycling, and using a mini trampoline have greater scores on neuropsychological function and performance tests that measure certain cognitive functions such as attentional control, inhibitory control, cognitive flexibility, working memory, declarative memory, spatial memory, and information processing speed. How fast does your brain process? Does your brain process fast or slow? How do we increase that processing speed? Exercise. And we'll read in a minute that exercise processing speed is increased for 2 hours after exercising. So if you're going for a test, exercise before the test, and you've increased your processing speed for 2 hours. The transient effect of exercise on cognition include improvements in most executive functions, such as attention. Now, why are we talking about this today? Are we talking about this to increase brain function, just to increase brain function? But what is the issue that we're talking about? Preparing the brain for battle. So do we need to have good attention in order to be ready for spiritual warfare? Preparing the brain for battle? Yes. Satan is going to be constantly tempting you. Do you need good processing speed? Or do you need to be like that guy down in Dallas said, oh, well, that's clear as mud. We need to have processing speed. Our brains need to be clean. Working memory, is that important? To be able to say, thus saith the Lord? To say what is right and what is wrong? Well, I don't remember. Is that right or wrong? Does that sometimes happen? People can't figure out whether it's right or wrong. But if we have good memory, that can help. Cognitive flexibility, inhibitory control. How about problem solving? Do we need to problem solve to be prepared for the battles going on today? Yes. It's interesting, we're told in inspiration, Eve walked away from Adam, not with intent, we're told, but separated. She found herself at the tree. She found a snake talking to her. That should have been enough right there. Snake goes talking to me, I'm gone. It's just a snake comes to me, I'm gone. But that snake's talking to her. But where was her mistake? She parleyed with the snake. We're told if she had not parleyed with the snake and had left, you and I would not be sitting here today. Isn't that amazing? We need to have good decision making. And information processing speed for up to 2 hours after exercising. We just talked about that. Let's talk about water, the other part of what makes this steam train work. Our brains depend on proper hydration to function optimally. Not just function, but optimally. Brain cells require a delicate balance between water and various elements to operate. And when you lose too much water, dehydration, that balance is disrupted. Your brain cells lose efficiency, your conductivity goes down, and the electricity in your body goes down. Years of research have found that when we are parched, when we're dehydrated, we have more difficulty keeping our attention focused. Maybe children need a little more water if they're having attention, whatever letters. Maybe they're drinking soft drinks that have caffeine in, which caffeine is a diuretic, which makes them even more dehydrated. Which has caffeine. Caffeine is literally like, whoever lived on a cattle farm? Anybody? You know what a hot stick is? Yeah. Caffeine is like a hot stick, constantly stimulating your nerves. You may not realize it, but they are. Caffeine, and here's that little child, we're setting them up to fail. Just like we set them up to fail because we don't get home till midnight, Saturday night, because we've been out playing rook with everybody at church. And why are those kids in a bad situation, a bad mood the next day? We set them up to fail because they didn't get adequate sleep. But can we set those children up to fail because of what they eat and what they drink? If we allow them to have the caffeine, can that caffeine overstimulate their nerves? Can it cause dehydration and cause them to be dehydrated, thus causing these problems with attention? Dehydration can impair short-term memory function and the recall of long-term memory. NASA. I was listening to a seminar with this fellow. He was an astronaut with NASA. He was also a medical doctor. And he said that statin drugs, he was talking about the problem of statin drugs. And what happens is a statin drug hews around a tree. And when you hew around a tree, the tree's going to die. And one of the branches on the tree is the body's production of cholesterol. And so because your doctor probably ain't going to get you to change what you eat, change your tongue, and you have high cholesterol. So what he's going to do is instead of you stopping eating cholesterol, he's going to turn down your body's production of cholesterol. And so he shuts down your body's production of cholesterol. So now you're just living off shrimp cholesterol and chicken cholesterol and whatever. But another branch on that tree is the body's production of coenzyme Q10. Well, that's a problem because you need, instead of being in a brick building, you're now in a straw building because cell wall stability, you need CoQ10, you need it for oxygenation. Here's the problem. One of the other branches on that tree affects short-term memory. And NASA was having astronauts go into space in a rocket and having short-term memory problems. That's not good. And this astronaut, who's also a medical doctor, he said, we had to reevaluate statin utilization because it is not an option for astronauts to have short-term memory problems. But if we're having dehydration, can we have issues with short-term and long-term memory according to the research? Yes. Are you drinking enough water? Or are you drinking something like sweet tea? Y'all know what sweet tea is. Does sweet tea have caffeine in it? It also has about 2 or 3 cups, depending on where you're from, of sugar. But that caffeine dehydrates you. The ability to perform mental arithmetic, like calculating whether or not you'll be late for work if you hit the snooze button for another 15 minutes, is compromised when your fluids are low. And that's not a critical, well, it could be a critical thing. You could lose your job. This is Psychology Today. This is from Psych Central. The effects of dehydration on brain function depend on severity of dehydration. Mild dehydration may adversely affect mood, clarity levels, or ability to concentrate. Pardon? Yeah, just mild. Severe or prolonged dehydration may cause serious cognitive impairment, delirium, permanent brain damage, or even death, according to Mayo Clinic. Is this end-time issues? Are we talking end-time issues here, y'all? We are. For us to be able to have the cognitive function, to have the clarity of mind, to discern right and wrong, just for ourselves, not to mention for the people who are also out there to be helping. If we don't have good brain function because we're not following these 8 laws of health, and you say, oh, it's just those 8 laws of health. No, it's not just. I had this couple come in one time. They're from Knoxville. Came in with some health issues. She goes to the bathroom. Husband sits down. I'm waiting on the wife to come out. And my son Carson had made this big old poster. And it had the 8 laws of health on it. And this guy was in his mid-60s, getting ready to retire, worked in healthcare his whole career. And he looks at that and he points at it and goes, those are the keys to health. I said, what you talking about? Sometimes you ask questions like that. Tell me, what are you thinking? He said, those are the keys of health. He says, I've worked in healthcare my whole career, and those 8 things are the keys to health. Are we surprised? Who gave it to us? How dare we ignore it, y'all? How dare we ignore it? But we do. Batman Jotty. Who's ever read Dr. Batman Jotty? Your Body's Many Cries for Water. Excellent book to have in your church library, because as you do medical missionary work here, because every church is to be a medical missionary training center, you need to have a library like Proof Positive and Dr. Thrash's literature and Neil Nedley's literature. And Batman Jotty is a great book to have. He was probably the expert on dehydration as a medical doctor. And he has so much scientific studies and the effects of dehydration, such as pain. Did you know that dehydration magnifies pain? You got problems with pain? Don't go for a painkiller to start with. Drink you some water. If you're dehydrated, it magnifies pain. But here's what Batman Jotty talks about dehydration. Just a mere 2% drop in body water can trigger fuzzy short-term memory. Is this end-time issues, guys? It is. Satan is there to tempt you. Do we realize the time that we're in? We're not in the toes, we're in the tips of the toenails of the image. And we've got to be special forces. I was over in East Hancock County, sitting there, which is right on the Pearl River. Literally, you can walk out the fire hall on the apron. That part in front of the fire truck is called an apron. You can walk out on the apron, look to your right, and you can see the Pearl River. There's times you can go out there, get in the fire truck, go to a fire, and you have to look for snakes, but you have to look for alligators. Because they can be on the apron or they can be under the fire truck. They just kind of come and sit around, whatever. We're just right there on the Pearl River. Well, up the river, the Navy SEALs have a base. I don't know where it is, but they come up and down the river, the Pearl River, training. One night, just down if you go right is the Pearl River, left, you go down the road just a little bit, and you hit a main road that will go across the river into Louisiana, into Slidell. And right there at the Pearl River is a little gas station. And you can go in there and get your whatever stuff. Well, one evening, the Navy SEALs were doing some training up and down, some night training up and down the Pearl River. And they decided they want to get some snacks there at that little gas station. So they pull off. A couple guys get out to go up. The other guys stay with the boats. They go up there to get their snacks. Unknowing to the two local boys that were robbing the place with guns, Navy SEALs were outside. Do you think they were aggressive? Do you think they took care of the situation fast and assertive? They did. Much more assertive than the sheriff's department would have done. As we look at end-time events, do we need to be the training of a Navy SEAL, the strength of a Navy SEAL, that boom, to deal with issues? The alertness? Dehydration can affect that. Trouble with basic math. Difficulty focusing on the computer screen or on a printed page. Batman Jotty continues, every function inside the body is regulated by and depends on water. And as I've taken numerous nutrition courses over the years, from continuing education and more courses, and they will tell you every time that water is the train car that carries nutrients throughout the body. And if you are dehydrated, you don't have the train cars to carry the water effectively. And Batman Jotty also identifies this. Water must be available to carry vital elements of oxygen, hormones, and chemical messengers to all parts of the body. So if you're dehydrated, that function doesn't properly work. The brain doesn't get proper nutrition. Look at this, guys. Without sufficient water to wet all parts equally, some more remote parts of the body will not receive vital elements that water supplies. Very important. Sunlight. Vitamin D boosts cognitive acceleration. In a study led by scientists at the University of Manchester in England, they looked at vitamin D levels and cognitive performance in more than 3,100 men aged 40 to 79 in 8 different countries across Europe. The data show that those people with lower vitamin D levels exhibited slower cognitive processing speed. We need to think sharp. We need to think quick. It's not how much vitamin D you take, it's what is your blood level. I had a lady come in. This lady is Caucasian. She works in landscaping all year long. She takes 5,000 IUs of vitamin D, and her vitamin D level is 12. Now, the lab will tell you 30 to 100. I remember when I got out of school, they told us anything over 32 was dangerous. Not true. Dr. Arvo Khanna will tell you that anything less than 60, Arvo is a neurologist that specializes in brain function, will tell you less than 60 will affect your cognitive function. The lab will tell you 30 to 100. Arvo says no, it's got to at least be 100. Dr. Ted Watkins will tell you in Washington, D.C. that it needs to be at least 80 to 100 for bone density for you to have a good immune system. And here we see, folks, excuse me, the data show that those people with lower vitamin D levels exhibited slower cognitive processing speed. This lady again, she's Caucasian. When I went to Africa last time, I took, who knows Dr. Urban Davis? You know, Irvin Davis. He's a black physician in South Georgia. I took him. We went to Africa together. We trained physicians and nutritionists we go over there and teach. And he tells them, he says, listen, our skins have sunglasses on them. It takes 6 times more sun exposure to get the same vitamin D as it does Walt. This lady is Caucasian, so it should be faster. She's in the sun all day long in landscaping. She takes 5,000 IUs a day. And she still has a vitamin D of 12. We went, so we doubled it, 5,000 twice a day. For 3 months, we went to 17 or 18. We went to 40,000 a day. For 3 months, we only went to 24. What was the problem? We added magnesium, and she went to 97. Magnesium is required to take the vitamin D. So vitamin D is not just how much you take. You've got to do a blood test. If someone comes to me and says, Walt, do I need to take something for my cholesterol? I don't know. I can't look in your blood. I got to look at a blood test for your magnesium. You don't look at the serum. That is not accurate anymore. It wasn't accurate before. We just didn't realize it. The RBC is much more accurate on your magnesium level. You got to look at the labs to tell this. Vitamin D deficiency is a current epidemic in our society, affecting 90% of the world's population. According to vitamin D expert Michael Hollick, we estimate that vitamin D deficiency is the most common medical condition in the world. It's clear that most people are not getting enough healthy sun exposure. Vitamin D deficiencies increase brain degenerative processes. This is an interesting study. Archives of Internal Medicine show that those who are classified as deficient in vitamin D were 42% more likely to have cognitive impairment. Meanwhile, those classified as severely deficient, such as this lady, I had someone the other day, her vitamin D level was 4. And I have some people who come in, it says undetectable. That means it's less than 4. Meanwhile, those classified as severely deficient were 394% more likely to have cognitive impairment. Do you know what your vitamin D is? Do you need cognitive impairment? No. You need good cognitive function. This is Archives of Internal Medicine. There's just so much I can share. Serotonin, brain function. How do we get serotonin? As we go outside, as sunshine comes through the iris or comes through the eye, it stimulates the pineal gland to convert tryptophan from your flaxseed this morning into serotonin. That's how you get it. There was an army in Africa that they got SAD. Now, I go to Africa. Mary Lou and I were in Africa just recently. I was in where was I? Winnipeg just recently. Even since then, they know what SAD is, seasonal affective disorder. But Africans getting SAD. So they brought in an expert. He starts looking around and he goes, why you got sunglasses on? Why you got sunglasses on? It's our new uniform policy. What it does is sunglasses blocks the ultraviolet light from coming into the eye. Therefore, you don't convert the tryptophan into serotonin by the pineal gland being stimulated by this ultraviolet light. He says, take them sunglasses off them people. Took them off, the SAD, seasonal affective disorder, went away. That even means if your glasses change and you walk outside and they turn dark. Now, it's okay for a person who works outside all day long, maybe some of the time, but they need sometime in the morning, sometime in the afternoon when the sun's not as bright to have some sun exposure to that ultraviolet light, or you're not going to convert that serotonin into serotonin. And serotonin is so important for your brain function. Just so many things that serotonin is important for. Poor memory, low moods, difficulty sleeping, low self-esteem, anxiety. Are you seeing a lot of anxiety out there today? I am. Especially since COVID, a lot of it's anxiety. Could just be their serotonin's too low. They're not getting outside and getting sunshine. And they're not eating their flaxseed. How about aggression? Are we seeing more aggression out there today? State trooper the other day, we were out on the interstate, lieutenant. He said, Walt, he said, this interstate's getting crazy. People are just going stupid. We just had a guy, excuse me, we had a county officer just day before yesterday morning. No, night before last. It was Thursday night. Pulled someone over for a routine traffic stop. Driver decided to shoot both officers. Killed one, wounded the other. People are just going crazy. Temperance, making the right decisions. I thought temperance was only I don't do alcohol, I don't do drugs, I don't do tobacco, so I'm good. But is it more than that? How about the music you listen to? Can that affect your brain? Can it affect your spirituality? That it can. How about TV? How about gaming? I was flying from Knoxville out west somewhere. I flew into Atlanta, got on a plane in Atlanta, flew plumb across the United States. I sit in the back. Though it may not help, probably doesn't help, statistics show people, if there's a crash, and if anybody does live, the people at the back live the longest. So that's where I have Walter put me. So I'm sitting there on the aisle. Up one chair, across the aisle is this fella in his mid-40s. You would have thought he was an 8-year-old playing on his little Mac computer all the way from Atlanta to the West Coast, playing gaming. In these games, he was cutting people's throats, he was stabbing them, he was blowing them up, he was shooting them, and he was bouncing in the seat like a little child. Is gaming bad for us? It can't. I never allow gaming in my computers at home for my kids. I said that's a waste of time. There ain't enough time to get what needs to be done, much less wasting it in gaming. Social media, how's that? Is that an issue out there today? Did you see what Susie's husband got her? Why can't you get that kind of thing? Did you see where Susie's husband took her on vacation? See that new dress Susie just got? It's affecting people. I won't even go into epigenetics. That's a huge issue there. The philosophy that genetically predisposed is becoming a myth. Not totally. I won't say plumb. But many times, genetically predisposed. I'll have doctors argue with me till the cows come home that granddaddy smoked and he got cancer, daddy smoked, he got cancer, you smoke, you get cancer. You're genetically predisposed. A little kindergartner will tell you, Mr. That's because you smoke. That's just horse sense. But we're learning yes, there is genetics and you can prove genetics. But what's cool is they're now proving that we can change our genetics. And you know what they're finding that changes the genetics? Is these laws of health. It's amazing when they talk about the effects of nutrition, the effects of exercise, the effects of where you live, country versus city. And these are highfalutin PhDs that are finding this out. Just because your mama and your grandma had it doesn't mean you have to have it. I have so many people come in and they have health problems and they say, just give me a healthy pill instead of an unhealthy pill. I said, well, you want to reverse that diabetes? You can't do it. My doctor told me I was genetically predisposed and everything you can do. Yes, there is something you can do. We can change epigenetics is changing the genes. And we could talk a lot on that, but I won't go into that. Another thing here is a law of the mind that it gradually adapts itself to the subjects upon which it is trained to dwell. What are you dwelling on? Are you dwelling on problems? Are you dwelling on good? Now, I'm not saying be polygamous, but are you just always thinking about bad stuff? Constantly? How would that air filter work? Not good. Adequate oxygen affects severe pollution on the brain. Children's psychological and motor development is negatively affected. Negatively impacts brain white matter, which affects nerve conduction speed. Is there a reason God said move to the country? Only one time have I flown into LA that I could see something, and that was during the pandemic. I fly into smog normally when I fly into LA. We're very blessed to be in a part of the world that we don't have that pollution. Brain inflammation, planning and memory, cognitive impairment, behavioral problems. Now, behavioral problems. What is our mission? What's our mission? To point the sin-sick soul to Christ. If you have behavioral problems, do people want your God? Do they want what you have? If you're mean as a striped snake? No. Oh, we just lost it. Okay. This was interesting. Crime rates increase. Are you surprised? This is an IH. And what happens in our cities? A lot of pollutions, a lot of crime. Improves brain's ability to function, gives clarity to the mind. Time to eat, huh? Someone told me the other day it was one of our churches, and they asked the preacher who came to the church, they said, do you quit on 12 o'clock? The ones that said no, they totally just pushed them off the table. The only ones that said that they quit at 12 o'clock would they even that was the primary, whether or not they'd accept him as being the preacher. Improves concentration. Boosts learning abilities. Let me step down here. It gives a sense of happiness and well-being. Promotes quality sleep. Kills bacteria and viruses in the air. Rest. That's a tough one, isn't it? Rest is a hard one. I used to, my best time of the day was from 8 o'clock to 1, 3 in the morning. And Mary Lou would pray and pray and pray for years. And finally, God blessed her prayers, and I'm ready to go to sleep at night. But my best time that I would stay up and get work done was between 8 and 2, 3 in the morning. But it significantly affects our brain function. Well, and it's not just how many hours of sleep we have, it's what time do you go to sleep. When I went to school, we did not know that the brain had a lymphatic system. The brain has a lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is our sewer system. And we found that the brain does have a lymphatic system. It's called the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system from 9 to 10 does a deep cleaning. You know what the lymphatic system does? It cleans the body. It's a sewer system. And then from 10 to midnight, it does a thorough clean. But you got to be asleep for that to happen. So you got to look at the hours of sleep. You got to look at what time you go to sleep, and then you want that contiguous sleep. You don't want that waking up multiple times through the night, so that you get that REM sleep. That's so important. Let me go on down through. There's so much that we can talk about the sleep here, but the importance of sleep on the mind. And I thought this was interesting, coming from science. Sleep can boost one's motivation and willpower, making it easier to fend off temptations. Isn't that interesting to come from the rocks? The rocks are crying out, y'all. Pardon? Oh, yes, exactly. And let's talk about the last one, trusting God. Anybody tell me where this is? What's the venue? Pardon? No? Where do you think the venue is? No? It's in a schoolhouse. It's in a schoolhouse. Every Florida school administrative building will be required to display "In God We Trust" according to a bill passed by the Florida House on Wednesday. The bill states the phrase must be displayed in a conspicuous place. When Tennessee K-12 students begin class next month, the national motto, "In God We Trust," will be required to be posted somewhere in their schools. When I go in the school systems, I'll be in the school system next Tuesday, unless the school's closed next week. No, it's closed next week. I won't be there next week. But I go in every month and I teach the kids. Used to, I could not say "In God We Trust." And so I'd have the kids pull out their money. And I said, "What's on every piece of your money?" And then they would say, "In God We Trust." And I say, well, and I could talk about what was on their money, but I couldn't myself say it. But they could say what they read from their money. Well, when this law came into effect in 2018, I can now talk about "In God We Trust" all day long. And the teachers are so happy about that. Arkansas schools to display "In God We Trust." A new law in South Dakota now requires all public schools across the state to feature in God We Trust motto on display. You go talk about this in New York City. Absolutely. Fortunately, go talk about this in Washington State or in Alaska or in Canada or in Sweden and tell them that our schools allow us to do this. They are so surprised. Kentucky is the latest in the line of states requiring in God We Trust motto in public schools. We've got it in our money. We got it on our police cars, and those states cannot believe that the law enforcement can put it on their cars. We've got it on our fire trucks. This is one of my fire trucks. This is engine 17.2. As we look about what we're talking today, yes, we're talking about preparing the brain for battle. We're talking about so that we have good processing speed, so our brains work well. And yes, there's benefits of it so that we can think well and whatever else. But the most important is preparing the brain for battle, yes, today, but that time to down the road. And I think one of the biggest temptations out there that Satan is going to use again. And I believe our church is doing a very poor job in preparing our church for this. We see it at the very beginning. Adam and Eve. Eve chose the fruit because of her desires of what that fruit could do. Adam did not choose the fruit for that. Adam committed suicide. Now, you may have an amazing love affair with your spouse, but Adam and Eve had the best love affair ever because it was no sin. No sin. When Adam saw Eve walking to him with this, fruit, he knew right then she was going to die. Because God had told him that. So what's he do? He could not, we're told in inspiration, he could not bear not being with her. And therefore, he chose his love for her over his love for God. And you and I are sitting here today. I believe Satan will use that at the end. Did it work? Did it work on humans? At the very end, when it's time to make that huge decision, Lot was faced with it. Did he have a battle regarding his kids? He tarried. And because he tarried, his wife died. He tarried because of his kids. And finally, the angels had to come and get his hands and lead him out. At the end, are we going to tarry because our love for our family is greater than our love for God? And how does our brain make that strong decision? It's by doing what we're talking about today. We have to have a strong brain. And then we have to say, is God, we put it on our fire trucks, we put it on our police cars, we put it on our money, but I ask, do you have it on your heart? Let's pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for your love and your care. We get so plumb busy with things going on in the world today that we lose track of what's going on. We lose track of the severity of the situation. As we talked about earlier this morning in Sabbath School, help us to better understand that responsibility that you've given each one of us, each church, each person, to be part of the medical missionary program we've set up, that we may be more effective, able to complete that mission to point folks to you. Lord, help us to prepare our brains. Yes, there's benefits in these 8 laws of health for our whole body, but help our brains to be strong, that we'll be prepared for your Son's soon coming. We ask this in Jesus' name.